Imagine you could borrow someone's 40 years of trial and error, not just the highlights, but the misjudgments, the awkward lessons, the moments that threaten to end the story, and convert all of that into a personal operating system for better decisions. That's the promise at the heart of Ray Dalio's book Principles, Life and Work. It isn't a motivational pep talk. It's closer to a blueprint, part memoir, part manual, built around one stubborn idea. Life keeps throwing the same kinds of situations at us, and if we learn the patterns behind them, we can build rules for handling reality skillfully instead of reacting on impulse. And before we dive in, a quick favor, because it keeps this kind of content alive. If you want to keep developing yourself and keep getting high-quality summaries from the world's most respected authors, please remember to like this video, share it with someone who's building a better life, and leave a comment. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these deep dives. Now, here's what makes this book different from most success books. Dalio doesn't start by listing principles. He starts by showing you why he needed them. Principles is organized in 3 big movements. Part 1 is his story, where I'm coming from. Part 2 is life principles, the rules he says helped him navigate reality as an individual. Part 3 is work principles, where those same ideas get applied to teams and organizations, so better decision-making can scale beyond one person's head. So as you listen, I want you to choose an identity for the rest of this summary. In the comments, type, "I face reality." Not because it sounds nice, but because the entire book is, at its core, a training program for that exact identity. The kind of person who looks straight at what is, stays humble about what they don't know, and still moves forward. All right, let's walk through the book in the order it unfolds, from story to life principles to work principles. And we'll end with how the book turns philosophy into something you can actually run day to day. Dalio opens Where I'm Coming From as a timeline, a series of eras that explain how his worldview was forged. In the early years, his call to adventure, you see an ordinary upbringing paired with a strong curiosity about how systems work. It's not biography for biography's sake. It's the seed of a theme you'll see everywhere later. Treat the world like cause and effect, not like a pile of random events. When you approach life like a machine, inputs, processes, outputs, you stop taking outcomes personally and start asking better questions. As the timeline crosses into his late teens and 20s, the period he frames as crossing a threshold, the book moves into the world of markets, competition, and uncertainty. This is where enthusiasm meets consequence. He learns something brutally practical. Being clever isn't enough. In environments where feedback is fast and unforgiving, your decision-making process matters more than your raw intelligence, because pressure makes people do weird things. Under stress, you don't rise to the level of your hopes. You fall to the level of your habits. Then comes the section he calls his abyss, the period where confidence collides with reality. Dalio describes a painful failure, the kind that doesn't just bruise your results, but forces you to question your judgment. And the story functions like a warning label. The biggest danger isn't being wrong. It's being wrong while your ego protects the mistake. This is where the hunger for principles really starts, not as slogans, but as guardrails you can trust when your emotions are loud and your certainty is high. In the following era, his road of trials, the rebuild begins. This is where you see his approach become craft rather than inspiration. He starts documenting lessons, turning them into repeatable rules, testing them, refining them, and sharing them with a growing team. And you feel the underlying logic. If you can build a process that learns faster than the world changes, you don't need to cling to single predictions or heroic guesses. You need a machine that keeps improving. As the organization expands into what he calls an ultimate boon, the challenge shifts again. At small scale, personality can carry you. At larger scale, personality breaks things. So the story begins pointing toward something bigger than one individual's brilliance, a culture and a system that can raise the quality of decision-making across many people consistently. Then there's a returning the boon era, where the principles become less like private notes and more like something that can be taught. The book keeps stressing a key idea. Once rules are explicit, you can debate them, improve them, and hold people, including yourself, accountable to them. When rules stay unspoken, they become politics. The final timeline chapter centers on transition and challenge, stress testing the system when the founder is stepping back and the organization needs to stand on its own. And then part 1 ends with a zoom out, looking back from a higher level. This is the bridge from story to method. It asks you to step above the drama of events and look at the pattern underneath. How decisions led to outcomes, how outcomes created lessons, and how lessons became principles. What's quietly happening in part 1 is this. You're watching someone build a feedback-based life. Dalio doesn't present his success as a straight line. He presents it as a loop. Make a decision, get a result, feel the sting when you're wrong, and then do something that most people avoid. Write down what the sting is trying to teach you. Over time, those notes become principles, and the principles become a process. The reason the memoir matters is that it makes the later chapters believable. You've already seen what happens when there isn't a process, and you've seen how expensive unexamined confidence can be. He's also careful about how you read it. The story isn't there so you can copy his career. It's there so you can copy the method, interpret your own life at a higher level, like an engineer looking at a machine, and then keep redesigning what you control. With that foundation laid, the book moves into part 2. And this is where the manual really begins. Life Principles opens with a deceptively simple instruction. Don't just collect experiences. Study the patterns behind them. When something keeps happening in your life, the same conflict, the same sort of mistake, the same frustration repeating in different clothes, Dalio's point is that you're probably running the same mental program. And if you keep running the same program, you'll keep getting the same output. The path out is not more willpower. It's better diagnosis. Trace the cause and effect, then write a principle that helps you respond better next time. Life Principle 1 is about embracing reality and dealing with it directly. But the heart of it is not pessimism, it's precision. He pushes you toward what he calls hyperrealism, the willingness to look at the situation as it is, not as you wish it were, and not as you fear it might be. In his logic, an accurate picture of reality is the foundation underneath every good outcome. If the picture is wrong, the plan is automatically wrong. So the first act of improvement is not motivation, it's calibration. From there, Dalio introduces 2 signature ideas that will echo throughout the book: radical open-mindedness and radical transparency. In plain English, radical open-mindedness is the habit of assuming you might be missing something important, especially when you feel certain, especially when you feel defensive, and especially when your identity is on the line. It's the ability to hold an opinion strongly enough to test it, but lightly enough to change it. Radical transparency is the decision to make what's true visible enough that you can deal with it. Not for confession points, and not for drama, but because hidden problems grow. When people dress things up, the organization, or the relationship, or the family, loses its connection to reality. And when you lose your connection to reality, you start making decisions based on fantasy. He reinforces this with a bigger perspective. Look at nature, not as a motivational poster, but as a demonstration of how reality functions. Systems evolve. They fail, adapt, and improve through iteration. If you fight that, you get stuck. If you align with it, you develop. This is where a key idea appears, often quoted, but easy to misunderstand. Discomfort plus reflection equals progress. Dalio's point isn't that you should become addicted to pain, or that suffering is noble. His point is that pain is information. It's feedback. It's your old way of operating hitting its limit. And if you treat that moment like data instead of like a verdict, you can learn quickly. If you avoid it, you repeat it. He also asks you to step beyond the immediate moment and think in second and third order effects. The first outcome is what happens right now. The later outcomes are what your choice sets in motion over time: habits, reputations, relationships, opportunities, unintended consequences. If you only optimize for the first effect, you can accidentally build a life that works today, but quietly collapses tomorrow. And then he introduces a framing that becomes the backbone of this whole book. Think of yourself as a machine inside a larger machine. Your habits, reactions, assumptions, and decision rules are the parts. The results you keep getting are the output. If you don't like the output, you don't need to shame yourself. You need to redesign the machine. Life Principle 2 is the engine room, the 5-step process for getting what you want out of life. It's wonderfully unromantic. It treats progress like something you can engineer. Step 1 is clarity on goals, and crucially, prioritization. Not the goals you think you should want, but the ones you actually want enough to organize your life around. You can pursue almost any objective, but you can't pursue all objectives at once. So the first discipline is choosing, and then letting the choice control your calendar. Step 2 is to identify problems and refuse to tolerate them. This is where many people stall. We treat problems like a personal insult, or like proof we're not good enough. Dalio reframes problems as signals, evidence that your machine isn't producing what you want, and therefore a doorway to improvement. You don't have to love problems. You just have to stop expecting them to disappear if you ignore them. Step 3 is diagnosis, getting to root causes. Not just what happened, but why does this keep happening? He pushes you to separate surface causes from deeper ones. Maybe you missed a deadline, but the real cause could be unclear priorities, a fear of asking for help, or a habit of overcommitting. Diagnosing well is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. But it gives you leverage because you can't fix what you refuse to name. Step 4 is design, building a plan that actually changes the system. A good plan isn't wishful thinking. It's a sequence of actions that, if executed, should produce different results. Dalio encourages you to visualize the path forward in concrete steps. Who will do what, in what order, and what success will look like at each stage. Step 5 is execution, pushing through to completion, tracking progress with clear measures, and building work habits that make follow-through boring and reliable. A beautifully designed plan without execution is just a comforting story. But he adds an important modifier. Weaknesses don't have to doom you if you build solutions around them. The goal isn't to become perfect. The goal is to know your predictable failure points and create compensating systems, reminders, checklists, feedback loops, relationships, so your blind spots stop running your life. Here's what this looks like in real life. Say your goal is to change careers. Define the destination clearly. List the problems you've been tolerating. Diagnose what's really underneath. Design a plan with concrete steps, and then execute while tracking progress. It's not glamorous, but it works, because you stop hoping for change and start changing the machine that produces your results. And this is the perfect moment for a second micro-commitment, because if you actually live this, it changes you. Right now, commit to one practice from this chapter. The next time something goes wrong, a conflict, a mistake, a burst of anxiety, you will treat it like data and try to diagnose it instead of just reacting. If you're willing to do that, put this in the comments. I will reflect. It's a tiny statement, but it's an identity shift. From I'm someone bad things happen to I'm someone who learns. Life Principle 3 takes you into the inner battle. Radical open-mindedness as a discipline. Dalio argues that most bad decisions don't come from lack of intelligence. They come from two built-in barriers, ego and blind spots. Ego makes you want to be right. Blind spots make you unable to see where you're being wrong. Together, they form a perfect trap, confident error. So open-mindedness becomes a practice. It means you care more about making the best decision than about looking good while making it. It means you learn to separate I feel certain from I am correct. It means you can have strong opinions that are weakly held, strong enough to take action, held lightly enough to update when evidence changes. He suggests practical ways to build this. Use pain as a cue to reflect instead of defend. Turn open-mindedness into a habit rather than a mood. Collect evidence. Seek out believable people, not just confident people, and test your thinking against theirs. He even includes practices like meditation as a way to notice your thoughts and feelings without instantly obeying them, so you can choose your response rather than being dragged by your impulse. Life Principle 4 shifts from inner work to social reality. Understand that people are wired very differently. If you've ever thought, why can't they see what's obvious? Or why do they react like that? This chapter offers a humbling answer, because they're not running your operating system. Dalio emphasizes that people are born with different attributes, and those attributes can help or hurt depending on where they're placed. He treats meaningful work and meaningful relationships as deep human needs, not just lifestyle extras. And then he looks at the brain's internal tug-of-war, the constant struggle between emotion and reason, between the conscious self and the lower-level habits that often steer behavior before you notice. The practical takeaway is, don't moralize these differences. Map them. He runs through common variations: introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuiting, thinking versus feeling, planning versus improvising. He distinguishes roles people tend to lean toward: those who generate ideas, those who refine them, those who push them forward, those who execute, those who flex between tasks. And he stresses a simple idea with enormous consequences. Getting the right people in the right roles is often the difference between ambition that stays a fantasy and ambition that turns into reality. Life Principle 5 pulls the whole system together: how to make decisions effectively. He starts with a blunt warning. Even brilliant people make terrible decisions when their emotions hijack the process. So one skill is recognizing when you're hot, defensive, fearful, euphoric, impatient, and slowing down enough to think. Then he moves into synthesis, learning to gather what matters, ignore what doesn't, and make sense of the whole. He nudges you to be skeptical of the first story you hear, to remember that close-up details can look bigger than they are, and to avoid obsessing over tiny data points that don't deserve that much attention. A major part of synthesis is time. Decisions happen in moving systems. So he urges you to look at rates of change, not just snapshots, and to use the 80-20 lens, finding the small number of factors driving most of the outcome. He also talks about levels. Sometimes you need to dive into detail. Sometimes you need to step above the line and see the broader structure. Great decision-making moves up and down these levels without getting lost in either abstraction or trivia. Then he does something very Dalio. He drags decision-making out of vibes and into probability. Ask, what are the likely scenarios? What's the upside and downside of each? What's the expected result, not just the hoped-for result? When is it worth seeking more information? And when is it better to decide with imperfect knowledge, because delaying is more expensive than being slightly wrong? He also introduces a concept that will return in the work section: believability weighting. Rather than treating every opinion as equal, You weigh input based on track record and the quality of reasoning. That doesn't mean ignoring fresh perspectives. It means separating confidence from competence and using disagreement as a tool rather than as a threat. Finally, the book points toward the idea of turning principles into something close to algorithms, decision rules that can be applied consistently and, in some contexts, supported by computer systems, while warning you to be cautious about trusting AI without deep understanding of what it's doing and why. Part 2 then puts it all together and offers a condensed reference table, essentially the life principles in compressed form, so you can review them and apply them when you need them, rather than only when you feel inspired. And by this point, the book has built a complete loop. Face reality accurately, choose goals deliberately, treat problems as puzzles, learn aggressively, map people honestly, and decide based on evidence rather than ego. Now we move into part 3, where those life principles get scaled into an organization, because Dalio's claim is that teams, companies, and institutions are machines too. And if you can design the machine well, you can systematically raise decision quality across groups, not just within yourself. Part 3 is work principles, and here the book becomes almost architectural. Dalio shifts from the individual decision-maker to the design of a decision-making environment, a culture where truth can surface, where people can disagree productively, and where the organization learns faster than its problems can grow. He begins with a framing. An organization is a machine with two big components, its culture and its people. If either is weak, the whole system produces weak results. So leadership isn't just task management, it's machine design. He also returns to the theme of tough love. In his view, caring doesn't mean protecting people from uncomfortable truth. Often it means helping them see what they can't see, so they can grow, and so the team can function. Done well, direct feedback becomes a form of respect, because you're treating improvement as more important than appearances. Then he sets a North Star for group decision-making, what he calls a believability-weighted idea meritocracy. Meaning, you don't decide based on who is most senior, most charming, or most forceful. You aim to decide based on which idea is strongest, and you evaluate strength by the reasoning and the real-world track record behind it. The first big work principles section is to get the culture right. And it opens with the twin pillars, radical truth and radical transparency. Dalio argues that you should build environments where people can speak openly about what's true, where problems are raised quickly, and where it isn't considered polite to privately hold a strong objection while publicly nodding along. In real workplaces, silence is often rewarded. In this model, silence is treated as risk. Now, if you're finding value in this so far, especially if you're hearing principles you want to bring into your own work life, take a second to like the video, share it with someone who takes improvement seriously, and leave a comment with the principle that's landing hardest for you right now. It helps me keep making these, and it helps this community find each other. The book is careful, though. Transparency isn't an excuse for cruelty or chaos. It's meant to enforce fairness and clarity. The goal is better decisions and faster learning, not constant confrontation. From there, the book moves to meaningful work and meaningful relationships, and the claim that, when supported by truth and openness, those two reinforce each other. High performance doesn't have to be cold. You can build deep bonds and do difficult work at the same time, as long as the group is loyal to a shared mission and clear about the deal, what's expected, what's fair, and what's actually happening. Next comes a principle that changes how you feel about failure. Create an environment where mistakes are allowed, but refusing to learn from them is not. Dalio's logic is evolutionary. Mistakes will happen because experimentation and challenge are required for growth. The real question isn't, did we mess up? It's, did we capture the lesson, or did we waste the pain? The book encourages you to look for patterns, not just in outcomes, but in the types of mistakes people repeatedly make, because repetition usually points to a deeper weakness or a broken process. Then comes get and stay in sync, alignment around what's true and what to do next. Dalio treats conflict as inevitable, but he also treats it as incredibly valuable when handled well. Getting in sync means surfacing where perspectives diverge, separating real complaints from noise, remembering that every story has another side, and running conversations in a way that produces clarity instead of heat. This part of the book is more practical than it first sounds. Staying in sync is what prevents teams from doing months of work based on different assumptions. It's what stops relationships from turning into two people arguing about the same event as if they watched different films. Dalio puts a lot of weight on the quality of conversation. Clear subjects, clear definitions, clear goals for the meeting, and an ability to notice when you've drifted into side debates or status games. When the communication is strong, collaboration can start to feel less like tug-of-war and more like improvisation, different people adding different lines, but still playing one song. A key skill here is being assertive and open-minded at the same time, strong enough to press for truth, humble enough to absorb new information. When teams learn to do that, disagreement stops being personal and becomes a method. From there, believability-weighted decision-making becomes the tool that turns disagreement into decisions. You build ways to assess whose reasoning should carry more weight in a specific domain. And you actively seek disagreement from credible people because it stress tests your thinking before reality does. But, and this matters, the process has to close. You can't debate forever. So the work principles include mechanisms for resolving disagreements and then aligning behind the final decision, even if individuals still have reservations. Otherwise, an idea meritocracy collapses into endless argument or factional politics. After culture, the book moves to get the people right, and the principles get surprisingly blunt. First, the who is more important than the what. The most important decisions you make are not about plans. They're about the people who will be responsible for outcomes. Dalio stresses clear responsibility. Someone has to own the result, bear the consequences, and have authority to act. When responsibility is fuzzy, problems multiply. Then comes hiring, and the cost of hiring wrong. The book pushes you to match the person to the design. Think through what the role actually needs in terms of values, abilities, and skills. Then make the search systematic enough that you're not just hiring on charm or familiarity. People are built differently. Different thinking styles suit different jobs. The goal is not to hire the best person. The goal is to hire the right person for this machine. Next comes training, testing, evaluation, and sorting. And this is where the tough love theme becomes operational. Dalio argues that accurate feedback is kinder than comfortable feedback, because it gives people a chance to adjust before consequences become brutal. He pushes for constant feedback, clear metrics, and assessment that aims to be true rather than simply pleasant. And he encourages making observations evidence-based, building a picture from patterns and specifics, not from gossip or vague impressions. The book also treats training as an ongoing process rather than a one-off event. The goal isn't to give people scripts, it's to help them build judgment. That means letting them stretch, make some mistakes, and then using those moments for learning, while still protecting the organization from repeated, avoidable errors. In this framing, a manager isn't just a supervisor. They're a coach and a designer of environment. Once culture and people are addressed, the book enters its largest work segment: to build and evolve your machine. The principle here is to manage like someone operating a machine to achieve a goal. You constantly compare outcomes to goals. You treat leadership like organizational engineering. You build metrics that tell you what is happening, not what you wish were happening. And you approach each situation at two levels. Handle the immediate case, and then ask what this case reveals about your machine's design. The next step is to perceive problems and not tolerate them. Dalio treats worry as a feature, not a bug. If everything seems fine, that might mean you're not looking carefully enough. So you create ways to detect not good enough early, through comparisons between reality and goals, through leaving space for people closest to the work to raise issues, and through multiple perspectives on important processes. He warns about groupthink too. If nobody seems concerned, that doesn't prove there's no problem. Sometimes it proves people have stopped looking. Then comes diagnosis. Get to root causes. Don't just treat symptoms. Ask what step in the process failed. Ask what principle was violated. Ask whether the issue is capability, design, or both. And avoid the lazy comfort of hindsight criticism. The point is not to feel superior after the fact. The point is to build a better forward-looking system. From diagnosis, you go to design improvements, and the book makes this explicitly iterative. You build, you systemize, you install guardrails. You keep the strategic vision steady while making tactical changes as conditions shift. You strengthen controls so dishonesty can't quietly poison outcomes. You make reporting lines and responsibilities clear. And you assume, realistically, that most things will take longer and cost more than expected. So you design with that truth in mind instead of being shocked every time reality behaves like reality. Then the book shifts from design to getting things done. Do what you set out to do. This section is about execution with sanity. It connects tasks back to goals, acknowledges that everyone is overloaded, and recommends practical tools like checklists, not as a substitute for responsibility, but as support for it. It also includes something many productivity systems forget: rest and renovation. If you never recover, your machine degrades. And it emphasizes closing loops, finishing, delivering, and marking progress so the team stays energized. After that, Dalio moves into tools and protocols, basically the idea that principles don't stick because you read them once. They stick when the environment makes them the default. Tools can collect data, turn it into insight, and make the reasoning behind decisions visible. Protocols can make difficult behaviors easier, raising issues early, giving feedback, documenting decisions, tracking whether the organization is improving. This is where the book's philosophy becomes something you can actually run. And then comes a topic a lot of teams ignore until it's too late: governance, checks and balances. Even an idea meritocracy needs structure, clear authority, clear reporting lines, clear decision rights, safeguards against fiefdoms, and a design that ensures no individual becomes so powerful that the system can't correct them. Leadership quality isn't just about one heroic person. It's about building a group of leaders and a governance structure that can hold each other accountable. After all these sections, the book includes work principles, putting it all together. The message is that culture, people, and process can't be separated. A great strategy with a broken culture fails. Great culture with the wrong people fails. Great people without a decision system get dragged into confusion and politics. The machine has to fit together. Then the book closes with a conclusion and an appendix focused on tools and protocols, a signal that Dalio isn't only claiming these ideas are inspiring. He's claiming they can be operationalized. Even the publisher description points to tangible examples like the baseball cards that capture employee strengths and weaknesses, and computerized decision systems designed to reflect believability-weighted input. And that's the full arc of principles, life and work. It starts with a life story to show why principles are necessary, then teaches a set of life principles for handling reality, learning, and deciding, and then scales those principles into an organizational design, a culture built around truth, a people system built around matching strengths to roles, and a machine built around continuous improvement. So here's the question the book quietly leaves you with. What are your principles, and are you living them, or just admiring them? If this summary helped you see your own decision-making machine more clearly, give this video a like, share it with one person who would genuinely use it, and tell me in a comment which principle you want to test this week. See you in the next summary.